verse from this morning. And so you can turn your eyes to the screen, or if you have a Bible with you as well, the first passage is 2 Kings chapter 4 from verse 1. The wife of a man from the company of the prophets cried out to Elisha, "Your servant, my husband, is dead, and you know that he revered the Lord. But now his creditor is coming to take my 2 boys as his slaves." Elisha replied to her, "How can I help you? Tell me, what do you have in your house?" "Your servant has nothing there at all," she said, "except a small jar of olive oil." Elisha said, "Go around and ask all your neighbors for empty jars. Don't ask for just a few. Then go inside and shut the door behind you and your sons. Pour oil into all the jars, and as each is filled, put it to one side." She left him and shut the door behind her and her sons. They brought the jars to her, and she kept pouring. When all the jars were full, she said to her son, "Bring me another one." But he replied, "There is not a jar left." And then the oil stopped flowing. She went and told the man of God, and he said, "Go, sell the oil and pay your debts. You and your sons can live on what is left." And our New Testament passage this morning is taken from Mark chapter 14, verses 3 to 9. While he was in Bethany, reclining at the table in the home of Simon the leper, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very expensive perfume made of pure nard. She broke the jar and poured the perfume on his head. Some of those present were saying indignantly to one another, "Why this waste of perfume? It could have been sold for more than a year's wages and the money given to the poor." And they rebuked her harshly. "Leave her alone," said Jesus. "Why are you bothering her? She has done a beautiful thing to me. The poor you will always have with you, and you can help them any time you want. But you will not always have me." She did what she could. She poured the perfume on my body beforehand to prepare for my burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the gospel is preached throughout the world, what she has done will also be told in memory of her. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let's welcome Fiona.
Good morning, everybody. Am I holding the mic right, Matt? Just good? Great. Yes, this summer we've been looking at how we can enter into the new term with less baggage. And for me, this summer has been really significant and transformational. So I wanted to share a bit about what's been going on with me, what God's been doing in my life. I'll start the story with a camping trip. About a month ago, I was at Focus, which is a camping trip with lots of Christians who are all part of the wider church network to which we belong. I didn't go with specific expectations other than hoping we'd have a good time. I don't really like camping, so that was quite a hope enough for me. And then the first night happened, and during the evening session, we heard from that passage in 2 Kings of Elisha and the widow. And they were talking about God doing amazing things and the need for us to be ready to join in with what he was doing. And I can't adequately explain it, but God did something in my heart that evening. He put this desire in me to join in with what he was doing in Torbay in a way that I hadn't been previously doing. And Elisha asks the widow, "What do you have?" And I had this deep desire to be closer to what God was doing, and I wanted to give it as much as I possibly could because it felt like the best thing I could do with what I had. And whilst this felt like an urgent and unlike anything I'd felt before, it was actually also a reawakening of a desire to be more involved in what God was doing in Torbay that had started many years ago. but it hadn't really happened like I thought it would. Because to give a bit of context, I've worked in the civil service for 12 years. I did a graduate scheme, I went from job to job, worked hard, and when I first started it all, I'd said to Matt, this is temporary. I'll do this, and then one day when you're leading a church, I'll leave it behind, and I'll just want to be more involved with what God's doing where we are. And then about 4.5 years ago, I said to my manager, I think I'm going to resign because we're probably going to move to Devon and start a church, and Devon is many, many hours away from my job. And she said, yeah, you could do that, but there's another option. You could work from home, come to the office occasionally. That way you could keep your job but make the move. And it was a generous offer, and it gave us stability amidst the change. The church hadn't even started yet. We weren't yet in Torbay. I didn't know what I could do in Torbay, so I didn't resign. Then not quite 2 years ago, I went on maternity leave to have our youngest. And as that year was coming to an end, I spoke to my new manager this time and said, I think I'm going to resign because I would quite like to have another year at home with my children. And she told me, yeah, you could do that, but there's another option. You could apply for a career break for a year that starts at the end of your maternity leave, and then you could have that extra year, but then you could come back to the job that you left. And it was a generous offer, and it gave us stability for financial planning. And I thought, yeah, maybe during this year, God will show me what he wants me to do in Torbay, and then I could leave the job. If he doesn't, this is a great safety net. So I didn't resign, and I started the career break. And then a few days before Focus, which was about 4 months before the career break was going to end, I got an email asking me to confirm within 14 days if I was returning to my job when the career break finished, or would I like to resign. And at the time, my head was full of camping and packing lists. So I put a reminder in my phone for the day after Focus with lots of exclamation marks saying do not forget, you've got to reply to this email. And I said to Matt, don't let me forget, because I needed to reply. And obviously I was going to say, yes, can I have my job back? Because actually it hadn't become obvious to me during this year what God might want me to do in Torbay that would mean I wouldn't go back to my job. And, cost of living crisis, the daily reality, isn't it? So yes, please, I'll take my job back. So that's the context. And then here I am in this field, feeling this incredibly strong pull to be more involved in what God is doing in Torbay. And I think maybe I should resign. And then I'll be more available. And I don't know what it would look like, but I've now been waiting for years for a neatly packaged opportunity in Torbay to come up, and it hasn't. And maybe I just need to leave my job and trust that God will lead me where he wants me to go. And I started having some ideas, small ideas of what that might look like. I was feeling really excited about the unknown, which is unusual for me because I love to plan for what's ahead. I check the weather, the tide times, I like to read reviews. I like to try and maximize the chance of things going well. And it might even seem a bit extreme to some people, the lengths I go to. One example is early this year, I'd found out about this place in Dartmoor that sounded like a really nice day out for our family. So I looked up more about it, found the car park, found it on Google Maps, read the reviews for the car park, and I found out that the car park was quite small. It got filled up quite quickly during the day. And then once you got there, you could pay for your parking using the app Ringo, but the signal was really bad, so even if you got a space, you might then struggle to pay. No bother. We left early, so we would definitely be able to park. And whilst we were driving over and I still had signal, I looked up the Ringo code for that car park and started it to begin for when I knew we were scheduled to arrive, so that they would not get in our way. It was not going to ruin our plans. Things would go well. I am fun, I promise. But yeah, so that person, me, who likes to know what's going on ahead and plan accordingly, I was planning to abandon this plan of returning to work. Then there was another little voice in my head that said, yeah, you could do that, but there's another option. you could go back to work. It's only 3 days a week, and God could use the rest of your time. Like, he's more than able to use what you give him. But this time, I resolutely was like, no, I don't want to go home and think, gosh, didn't I get carried away at Focus thinking that I might leave my job? And like, how silly, ha, ha, ha. No, like, instead I prayed and I said to God, like, I will leave my job, but only if you want me to. Because suddenly, actually, what I did wasn't that important, but doing what God wanted me to do was. And I felt like he did want me to do that. So Focus finishes and I go home. And the next morning, I read the different gospel accounts of the woman with the alabaster jar of perfume. One of the songs we sang at Focus referenced this story. I've always loved it, and that's what I decided to do for my Bible reading that morning. And the bit that really stood out to me that morning was that phrase, I don't know if you caught it there, where Jesus says, she did what she could. And in my journal, in big letters, I wrote, she did what she could. And then I went back to that reading from the first night of Elisha and the widow, and I read that again. And then underneath, she did what she could, I wrote, what do you have? And I knew what I wanted to do was stop limiting myself by focusing on what I lacked, a big picture plan and the security it could bring, and instead simply do what I can with what I have, trusting that God will use it all for his purposes. The woman with the alabaster jar, she was criticized in every account given of this story. And, who knows how long it had taken her to be able to accumulate something worth over a year's wages. Who knows what she had potentially done to attain for herself this financial security, or what her plans had been for it. But one day she chooses to give it all up as an act of worship and adoration for Jesus. And I don't know if in that moment she even registered the criticisms, but I know Jesus did, because in every account he tells them to stop. And when it comes to what we do with the things we have, only one voice needs listening to, only one opinion matters, and that's Jesus's. He saw what she did with what she had, laying down what was precious to her as an offering to him, and he called it a beautiful thing. The vicar, Johnny Gumbel, has written an amazing book called, I haven't even finished it, but I know it's so good. If anyone wants to borrow it, when I finish it, I'll lend it to you. But in it, he says this, I think we've got it on the side as well. God asks us, what do you already have? Instead of wishing you had more or waiting till you have more, we can give him what we have now and see what he does with it. I knew what I had in my hands was a call by God to join in with his work in Torbay, and I didn't know what it would look like, but I changed my response from waiting until I did know, and therefore limiting my activity, to responding with obedience. I said earlier, I'm someone who likes to maximize the likelihood of things going well. Well, going well no longer seemed to equate with having a job. I resigned. I did it, finally. God is very patient with me. And I'm excited to see what God does with what I have, because I know that even though it's not a lot, he's able to do great things. And my evidently small contribution to whatever I get to be part of will only bring more glory to his name. 2 Chronicles 20 verse 12 says, we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. And that's my plan, to just keep returning my gaze to Jesus and taking it one step at a time where he leads me. And why am I sharing this? It's not because I think you all need an update on my life, but because I'm sure I'm not the only one who has been limiting myself because of what I lacked. And I think it's a funny kind of baggage, letting go of what you don't even have. But it's amazing how much it can weigh you down, how it can stop you from getting up and stepping out into what God is calling you to do. And actually, I think those limits, they're about control, saying I'll do it on my terms. And behind the need for control is probably fear of letting go and it not working out the way we had hoped. And perhaps even some pride in thinking, maybe I can provide for myself better than you can, God. William Carey, who was a missionary, said, and it's on the slide as well, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of succeeding at the things that don't matter. I love this. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm afraid of succeeding at the things that don't matter. And if I'm really honest with myself, I think I started this summer believing that financial security or maintaining a certain level of comfort mattered a lot. And my requests for God's provision were provisional on him lining up something for me before I let go of my current job security. And I allowed myself to spend 4 years waiting for God to comply with my terms. And last month, I realized that I'd spent those 4 years succeeding at being financially secure, but failing to step into what God was calling me into in all its fullness. I think that's really sad. Like, I'm not waiting anymore. One of the ideas I had at Focus was to use a few things that I have in my hands. So one of them is I like going for a morning sea swim. Another one is I like starting my day with God. And another one is I like people. And I was thinking, and I want to do more things in Torbay. And I was sort of thinking about what might this look like. And then the person who was standing next to me in worship leaned over and said, I've just had a picture of you standing by the sea. So I was like, okay, I'm doing it. And then less than a week after we got back from Focus, I'd started something called Soul and Sea. We meet at 6:30 in the morning by the sea. We listen to a daily devotional together, and then there's an optional sea swim. And it's already been such a special, life-giving time. I absolutely love it. I love who comes along, and the time we have together has been, really special. And I'm looking forward to running it as a Bay group this term. So if anyone else would like to join me, please do. But what might this look like for you? How can we be a people who do what we can with what we have, not in our own strength, but in the strength of the one we hand it over to? How can we shift our focus from what we lack to the one who is never limited by our offering, however small? And what might this look like for you? I think it begins with simply asking, God, show me what I currently have that you want to use. Maybe you've even had things come to mind as I've been speaking. I've been praying that you would. Maybe you've got gifts, dreams, or a pull on your heart, but you also see what you lack: time, energy, money, confidence, and you're letting it block you. Maybe in your hands is a desire to spend more time with God, reading the Bible and praying, but what you lack is structure and discipline. So you've been putting it off until it comes more easily. Maybe in your hands as a person you'd love to invite to Alpha, but what you lack is confidence that they'll receive the invite well. So you've been putting it off each term, thinking maybe next time I'll ask them. Maybe in your hands is a potential commitment of your time or your finances. But what you lack is a willingness to have less than you currently have. So you've been tightening your grip. As these things come to mind, we can say, God, this is what I have. I offer it to you now. I don't want to delay any longer or let my own limitations hold me back. Please, would you meet me where I am and do something with this that I could never have done in my own strength. Please use it for your purposes and for your glory. And if you're not sure what to do with what you have, his voice and his opinion are the only one that we need to listen to. So we can do that by spending more time with him, reading your Bible, praying, drawing close to him, seeing what he puts on your heart and what he gently convicts you of, and then take the next step, let it lead into action. And whatever we end up doing, we're not the main character, Jesus is. It's his story and his purpose, and we're simply invited to join in with what he's doing. What this looks like for each of us will vary, but our ordinary offerings become extraordinary when they're given to God. We see this in the Bible time and time again. The widow's little jar of oil, the staff in Moses' hand, the boy's lunch of loaves and fishes. And in Johnny Gumbel's book, he says that Jesus is the perfect example of doing what he could with what was in his hands. And ultimately, what was in his hands? 2 nails holding him onto a cross made of ordinary wood. But in his hands, it became the means of saving the world. God is doing something in Torbay. He's inviting us to join in with it, with what we have. So let's stop holding back Let's step into his calling with open hands and hearts. Let's pray.